You, Anna.
Michael, thanks very much indeed. Now, they were the scourge of the establishment, and 40 years ago they were forced off the air. Offshore pirate radio stations helped propel artists like The Who and Tom Jones into the charts and became too popular for the government to ignore. But 4 decades after a law was passed that banned them, a new breed of pirates are still going strong. Sky's Matt Smith reports from the North Sea.
In the mid-60s, they were the loudest thing on the dial, broadcasting pop music to millions.
Caroline!
But in 1967, the government wanted pirate stations like Radio Caroline and Radio London shut down, and this was the day they tried to do it.
Listening to Radio Caroline, broadcasting from the Ross Revenge on the North Sea.
It didn't completely work. While many pirate ships did give up, some, like Caroline, carried on dodging the authorities right up until the early 90s.
We're broadcasting, of course, on medium wave all around the Essex area.
So 40 years on from the government ban, one DJ who famously broke the new law is back at sea again and back on the air. Johnny Walker, just one of many who've boarded this authorised pirate station moored off the Essex coast to mark the anniversary.
Every time the politicians said, we've got to close down these pirates, we thought, no, you won't, you know. And we didn't think they would. And when they brought in the new law, we thought, yeah, this time they actually are being serious. So we're going to defy them.
At the height of the 60s, there were around 3 or 4 of these type of ships moored here off the Essex coast. And while the government may have hated the pirates, the listeners loved them. And today it's a new breed of pirates that are jamming the airwaves. This time from tower blocks and lockups in city centres, rather than ships miles out at sea. But, say the DJs, the reasons for doing it are exactly the same.
It's obviously a demand. If you say 16% of the country listens to pirate radio, there is obviously a demand there for it, and it should always be supply and demand.
So 40 years on from the day the storm clouds finally gathered over the pirate ships, they're still on air and still flying in the face of authority. Matt Smith, Sky News, off the Essex coast.
And the veteran DJ Tony Blackburn joins us now live from Hertfordshire. Tony Blackburn, you're one of the pioneers of pirate radio. When you see reports like that, does it bring back happy memories for you?
Oh, terrific memories, actually, Anna. I mean, I was out on the pirate ships for 3 years. 1964 I joined, and it was just tremendous fun. And I knew at the time that we were going to alter the whole of broadcasting in this country and eventually bringing, you know, popular music to everybody 24 hours a day. And I'm very proud to have been a part of that era. It was just terrific.
Well, yes, and it really did provide an alternative, didn't it? Because at the time, in the 60s, there were only 3 national stations, and you weren't going to get anything like the kind of music that you'd hear on Radio Caroline and Radio London that you worked for, would you? To what extent did they change the scene?
Well, tremendously. I mean, when I grew up, all I had was the light programme and the Northern Dance Orchestra and Parade of the Pops. And there was about, I think it must have been about an hour's popular music on the BBC every day. And you had to wait till the evening to hear Radio Luxembourg, which faded in and out. And there was nobody there really broadcasting to the teenagers of the day. And so therefore we went out there, and eventually, of course, we brought about this wonderful new sort of system. And I was with Radio Caroline for 2 years. That's the first one, but the one that really did influence broadcasting, I think, more than anything in this country was the one I joined later, Big L Radio London. It brought in the jingles, those wonderful American jingles, and also the top 40 broadcasting system, which really is what modern day radio goes to now. And when Radio 1 opened up, they really hired most of the disc jockeys from Big L Radio London. But Radio Caroline was the one that pioneered it, and it was just terrific being out there.
And it was a pretty rebellious spirit, really, wasn't it? In defiance of the government, in defiance of mainstream broadcasting. Did it feel like that? Did you feel like a rebel when you were on the high seas, Tony?
Yeah, look at us now. It was. It was. I remember going out for the first time on July the 25th, 1964, and looking at that little boat out there, the Mi Amigo, and thinking, this is giving the government so many problems. And I thought, how wonderful, because it was about time things changed. You know, monopolies are not a good thing to have. And it was great to be that rebellious in those days. I did end up actually shipwrecked off the coast of Frinton, and that's the first time anything actually has ever happened there. And we were taken off by breeches boys. So it was just great fun. You know, we were all very young. I was 21 years old then, and what a great adventure to have. And I look back at some of those shots now, and I just can't believe I was a part of it.
Tell us a little bit more about that shipwreck. Were you actually working at the time?
Well, yes. Yes, well, luckily, I was actually I was asleep. We'd gone off the air at 8 o'clock, which was lucky because there was a 10-force gale, and Norman St John, one of my friends there, he came up and said, we really ought to get up because, you know, I think we're going to be shipwrecked. And I thought that's, you know, we were always joking about that. And I went up, and about 100 yards out, because it was very, very dark, and the captain, or the skipper, he actually shone a light, and there were people walking along the seafront. And I remember him saying, Mayday, and I thought to myself, he's probably left it a bit late. There was a crunching noise, and then suddenly this breeches boy came over, and we were lifted off. But it was an amazing incident, and I was the first off the ship. I wasn't that stupid.
So, unusual hazards working out at sea. Was it a different atmosphere? I mean, it's a slightly odd place to have your office, isn't it?
Well, it was, yes. I mean, we were actually meant to be going to Holland, but we always stopped off every fortnight to play records, and then we came back. We had to go through customs, and when we came back, the customs suddenly, sometimes, you know, were very awkward, and they wouldn't let us back into the country without keeping us waiting for a long time. But it was a tremendous atmosphere out there. It was really a family, and this was the great thing about it. It was a family out there enjoying one another's company, playing records, realizing we were doing something totally different, and something that you couldn't obviously do nowadays. So it was just a terrific adventure, and still to this day, you know, we're always we keep in touch with one another, and we get together now and then. In fact, there are two ships already actually out there. BBC Essex is doing one at the moment, and I think Big L, another station, they've got a ship, but they're anchored about 100 yards off the coast, I think, and the other one's by the side of a pier. So it's not quite the same, but nevertheless, you know, they're doing their best, and it's a terrific thing nowadays. And for all radio anoraks, this is the week that we've all been building up to.
And you talked about the fact that it really put a huge amount of pressure on the BBC to get up to date and to get into communication with its younger audience. With the birth of Radio 1, it stole a lot of the ideas from pirate radio, as you said. You joined Radio 1 at the outset, didn't you? Very early on, at least. Did it feel like you were going establishment when you went there?
Well, it was. I mean, I realised the Marine Offences Bill was coming through, and I was offered the chance of opening up Radio 1, which I did on September the 30th, and I thought this is the time. I'd been out there 3 years, and you know, it was lovely, but 3 years was enough, and to be given the chance to open up Radio 1 was great. And very sensibly, the BBC said, look, we're not going to go our own way. You guys know how to do it. And they brought some of us in, and we basically copied the Pirates. We had the same sort of jingles, and I thought it was pretty good. We had restrictions on how many records we could play and things like that, but it all eventually sorted itself out. And it was, once again, you know, I was very lucky to be in a part of pirate radio, then of course to have opened up Radio 1. And of course the anniversary of the opening of Radio 1 is coming up very shortly as well, so the fun goes on and on.
And what do you make of the fact that pirate radio seems to be thriving now, 40 years after it was banned?
Well, it is thriving, but it's not quite the same. I mean, it hasn't quite the same atmosphere. I mean, you know, doing it from tower blocks and things like that. And it is a slight problem now because there weren't quite so many of us at that time. But now, some of the pirates nowadays, they are actually interfering with the legal radio stations. And that is a bit of a problem. But what we were doing in the 60s, we were really pioneering. The whole idea was to bring about commercial radio in this country, which is what we did. But I mean, you know, the pirates that are on nowadays will say there is room for them and things like that. I don't know, you know, that's a different debate altogether. But, you know, they are there. And
it's an interesting one just because they would say they're communicating to an audience that isn't catered for at the moment, which is exactly what you were setting out to do in the 60s. So it is a legitimate argument, isn't it?
Well, yes, I mean, I wouldn't argue with them as well. They're doing exactly the same, except, of course, we were in territorial waters and we weren't actually, I don't think, committing an offence, you know, because we were flying under the flag of Panama. And so, therefore, we were outside the territorial waters and we weren't in the jurisdiction of this country. So what we were doing was slightly different. And we weren't also interfering with legal radio stations as well. We made sure that that didn't happen. So it was all done very responsibly. And you know, in this country, sometimes you have to do these things to get change, and that's exactly what we did. So it was done for a reason. You know, we were so behind the Americans with bringing commercial radio in here, and that was the idea, and eventually, of course, that's what happened.
Well, Tony Blackburn, I trust you'll get your anorak on and enjoy your celebrations. Thanks very much indeed.
I shall put it on very shortly. Thank you, Anna.
Okay. This is Sky News. Over on our website, sky.com/news. Cashing in the winning ticket. Camelot dishes out Britain's largest ever lottery windfall.